This is the 17th season of Bass Talk Live with your hosts, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrat. BTL is brought to you by Lawrence, Bass Cat Boats, APCO, Duck and Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, Exo Lures, Yamagatsu, The Bass Tank, and Denali Rods. BTL coming at you. Good Monday, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where Matt and I are going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. And Matt, dude, I'm freaking wiped. I am wiped. The heat, the walking, the information overload. It was quite the 3 days down in the DFW area. And I can honestly say my 23rd Classic, dude, that was, and I've been to some summertime classics, that was the hottest, most humid classic that I've ever been to.
It was pretty draining, and those guys got on stage and talked about it too. I mean, a lot of guys talked about how hot it was, and then it was an interesting one.
It was.
You kind of nailed it, though. I'm looking at the odd sheet that I've got pulled up here that you came out with just before, and a lot.
Well, hang on a minute here. We're gonna throw something up here. Let me do a couple things. Hang on, I got to get rid of that. All right, this is how the odds worked out, and obviously Hank Cherry getting the win back to back. But the underdogs, Hookie the Bookie, I think would have took a bath if one of those underdogs in yellow would have won.
I remember, but during the show, remember you said you talked about Justin Kerr, and we talked about Chris Jones, and we talked about Matt Airy, and we talked about those guys, and it was weird to wrap you had no idea what was going to happen on day 2, and then you had no idea what was going to happen on day 3. Did you not feel like there was and even though Hank had a 5-pound lead after day 2, I mean, it never really felt like anybody had a death grip on this classic.
Well, and we're going to dive into this a lot and talk about some of the stuff behind the scenes and some of the things that were very in front of the fans' eyes from the broadcast standpoint and some of the other things that took place during the 3 days. But when you do look at my odds sheet, you talked about Chris Jones. Chris Jones, I had him at 18-1. The dude almost won this thing. He really did. Mm-hmm. And it was right up his alley. And the thing that amazed me the entire 3 days of competition, there were very, very few anglers that were fishing out. This thing was a shallow water in the bushes from day one. That's how it was going to be won. And there were really two things that stuck out. One, the fact that a lot of these guys were catching fish that hadn't even spawned out yet.
There are some pretty fish.
Unbelievable. It was 80-degree water, and some of these fish had not spawned out yet. And then the other thing was the fact that right here on this bait, all right, it's not even out yet, this new jerk bait that's going to be launched at ICAST right here, that Hank Cherry was able to catch it off the dam.
So that kind of counts as a prototype bait. That the Classic was one of the prop bets.
It's not a prototype.
That's a push.
Because it is launching at ICAST this week. And it's called the Stunna. Not Stunner, but Stunna with an A.
There you go.
And it is Hank Cherry's bait. And then the other thing, and we saw a ton of it, a lot of flipping on soft plastic, creature baits. And I honestly, Matt, I was somewhat shocked that there wasn't a whole lot of people trying to find that mother lode that was out, not necessarily in 10, 20 feet, 30 feet, whatever it was. But, man, everybody stuck to the guns. And, unfortunately, that 2-hour delay, along with some missed opportunities, cost some people this classic win.
It did. I think more so than any classic we have seen in recent year. Because remember, I've always said I feel like there is a limited number of ways a classic can be won when it is in early March.
Yeah.
And would you not agree with me, Mark?
No, I agree.
You kind of have you can take 3 or 4 boxes and go and say it's probably going to be won this. Now, obviously things change, but I feel like the majority of the field, and obviously everyone does their homework in the classic because, Mark, it is the Bassmaster Classic.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of guys who did a lot of prep and work going into this classic had to throw it all out the window.
It was a shallow water deal, dude.
And the
really
rising
was.
water, the water temp that came up almost 15 degrees over the course of the event, the storms, the wind completely changed strategies on day 2 and day 1 for a lot of the different guys. And a lot of guys who came in and said, I'm going to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
That stuff wasn't working.
All right, on my odds, one person that I had as one of the favorites, Chris Zaldain, 5-1. We're going to have him on the show. And when I saw him at the Outdoor Expo, I said, look, man, I said, you were probably one of the most interviewed guys prior to this classic. You had the HFA, but you did not make it happen. And here, let me see if I can reduce this down. Let's see here. Yeah, for some reason that column doesn't show up. Anyway, wherever he finished, did not fish on the
40th place.
Day.
He had 4 for 13.11 on day 1, and then he just had 1 fish for 1.5 on day 2.
So I said, "How many interviews are you going to do after the thing?" And he said, really, "Nobody." I said, "Man, we need to get you on the show Monday because I want to find out what happened. And if you want to find out what happened, you can talk to the people that had an enormous amount of success, and then you can talk to the favorites that did not perform well." Obviously, we're not going to get some of the top guys on because they're traveling. They have obligations. But with Chris living right there in the DFW area, he was willing to come on, and we'll have him on here in a few minutes.
Absolutely. There were also one of the things that stuck out to me was how many guys who I thought this would be in their wheelhouse as the, you got through media day and you saw the conditions and you saw the photo galleries of the flooded bushes. Yeah. And we were talking about this coming in. We're talking about, the Bill Lowens and guys, Chad Morgan Taylor, Brian News, John Cox, those guys who you're like, oh, this is in their wheelhouse, flipping this stuff. And they really struggled as well. In fact, only 4 limits, Mark, of 15 fish. In the Bassmaster Classic, I think we had the over-under at like 35 limits a day for the first day. But the top 3, Hank, Matt Airy, and Chris Jones, had a 15 fish limit, and then Scott Canterbury did. And you're talking about over half of the top 10 in this Bassmaster Classic did not bring 5 fish to the scales each of the days. In fact, Patrick Walters in 10th, he only brought 11 over 3 days.
It was really hard. It was very, very difficult. The 2-hour delay that took place on day 2 really shut a lot of guys down because of the shad spawn. Shad spawn was a huge, huge factor in this event. And quite honestly, I thought it might be a factor, but I didn't know it was going to be this much of a factor. It really did.
It was. I actually talked with Chris Jones behind stage. Obviously, he had a really good first day. And after practice, he had a little bit of a shad spawn going, and he also had a 1-2 punch. A lot of these guys had 1-2 punches. Did you notice that too, Mark? Like Steve Kennedy had the morning thing, and then he had the deep trees. Chris Jones had the bush flipping, and then he had the shad spawn. Hank Cherry had bushes, and then he had the jerk bait at the dam, which is what Jeff Reynolds said how this would go down. It wouldn't be a one bait deal, right? So that was dead on. Yeah. But I talked with Chris Jones, and he said, man, I shook off some just big ones in the bushes. Like, on Grand, you flip into the willow, and a dome, you're like, oh, I gotta go back and catch that one. But he said on day 1, he was like, shad spawn, 17.5 pounds right off. And then he's like, man, this is going to get good. And he flipped the whole rest of the day and caught 4 1-pound fish out of the bushes. So he said, okay, well, this is a shad spawn deal then. So he's got the white swim jig on, the same deal that he's won the Arkansas River Open a year and a half ago to get into this tournament with it being postponed. Well, then there's a 2-hour delay. There's lightning, which really affects the shallow fish. Well, now he's got no shad spawn, and then he has to go flip bushes. So it seems like out of all of the 1-2 punches that there were, the only guy who was able to make both of his 1-2 punches work was the guy who ended up lifting the trophy at the end of the tournament.
He was very fortunate, too, on day 2 when he was able to go out and catch the 6 and the 4 after the delay. And I really, really think that day 2 and the lack of being able to land some key fish for a lot of those guys on that list that you're seeing right there really enabled Hank Cherry to win back-to-back. Now, let me ask you this. Do you know what Justin Kerr was using? This is freaking cool.
I know it was something West Coast.
No.
No?
No.
No, what was he using?
He was using a jig and pig. An Uncle Josh pork trailer on his jig. Jig and pig. And I talked to him for an extended amount of time, and he's like, look, man, it's all about how that pork would fall when he flipped it into that bush. All right? How long has it been since somebody had a top 10 finish using a jig and pig?
Hank Parker?
How cool is
in
that?
The Classic in June.
Dude, we've talked about the jig and pig before, and we're going to get him on the show here in a couple of weeks and talk a little bit about that.
He was another guy who was a victim of not having a limit. He weighed in 14 fish. He finished 4th, but that second day he had 4 fish for 19-12.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a 5-pounder away. Steve Kennedy had, how big do you think that one was? An 8-pounder that was on the
Maybe.
jig?
I mean,
and a
who
5-pounder,
knows?
and he didn't have a limit either of those 2 days. So you're talking massive amounts of weight, and then not to mention what happened to Matt Airy on the final day with 18 pounds with those fish that came off on top. It was a tournament of execution and of making multiple patterns work. And like you said, there was one guy who executed and made multiple patterns work, and he won.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think I did okay on the odds. I think, we take a look at it post-tournament and see if I was in the ballpark. I think I missed a few, as I do every year. But Hank Cherry getting the win at 6-1. I think it would have been a good balance for the sports book if Vegas took money on this. And by the way, I ran into somebody who has a really, really good friend that works at a sports book who is a manager in a sports book at Vegas. We're going to try and get him on the show and find out why that they refuse to take lines on bass fishing.
Okay.
So that's something coming down in the future. All right, man. How'd the prop bets go?
The prop bets went well. The one prop bet that I think I drastically underestimated was there were a lot of guys at that expo the first day. Now, granted, there's a bass MLF pro circuit event going on, so a lot of those guys who are fishing both circuits were practicing for that upcoming. But there were a lot of guys, the Kevin Van Dams and Josh Bertrands, at least I saw Cody. A lot of those BPT guys were in the show, so there were definitely more than 15 that I ran across. I saw Randy Howell there, a lot of guys working the Expo, Cliff Pace, a lot of former Classic champions. There were a lot of former Classic champions that were at the Expo, so that was definitely it. There was I wrote his name down. It was someone that I didn't expect. He listed 13 sponsors in his final day speech.
Do you have the prop bets? Do you have the stuff?
Yeah, I'll have all that stuff finished for tomorrow.
Okay.
For 100%. But the over-under on that was hit. And then...
do you owe me lunch?
Yeah, I think I owe you lunch.
Yeah, where did Clark Wendlandt finish?
Clark Wendlandt, he made the cut, but Clark Wendlandt barely made the cut. He finished in 23rd, so I definitely owe you lunch on
All right,
that.
let me ask you this. How many times do you think he's been on Ray Roberts?
Not a lot.
Give me a number.
2.
He's never been on the lake. In all that time, I spent a lot of time with him in the media room. In all that time, in all the filming of his shows, they've never done a show on Ray Roberts. He's like, it's 4 hours away. There's a ton of lakes, ton of bodies of water around where he lives. Has never shot one of his television shows on Ray
like
Roberts.
A Texas lake like that. We saw a lot of the guys who were from Texas, like with him, with Frank Talley, who actually caught an 8-pounder. And then I thought it was really cool what Cody Bird did coming into the Bird is the Word song. I don't know if you listened to what he said on stage the first day, that Mark Pack, who recently passed away this past year, really good friends with Cody Bird right there, kind of a legend in Texas, always tried to get Cody Bird to come into that song. And Cody Bird, old school country, former rodeo guy. I was like, no, I'm not that. People will make fun of me. So that was kind of his tribute to Mark Pack in Texas to come in
it was
with
cool.
that. But he had a top 20 finish as well.
Yeah, you know what else Justin Kerr used? This was pretty cool too.
He used a rat?
A rat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that's a Lake Mead thing? Or
a West Coast thing, man.
Okay.
And I asked him also, I said, why do you think you did so well this tournament? Was there anything West Coast that really kind of set up for you to where you had a lot of confidence? He said, Clear Lake. He said, I grew up fishing Clear Lake when the lake was up, flipping bushes and trees and stuff like that. And he said he loves fishing like that. The guy that's won the U.S. Open and is an absolute stick on the West Coast almost pulled it off here in the state of Texas. So it was cool. Jig and pig, baby.
That's the thing. The other thing that I thought was interesting when we got down there, and I didn't realize they were going to do it because this was a rescheduled classic, they weighed the fish for the first 2 days on site at Lake Ray Roberts and then allowed the anglers to bring in either their biggest or their two biggest to hold up on stage.
Yeah.
And I wondered, how is that process going to work? You know, how are they going to flash? And the way that they did it with Trip up there, I thought it seemed very organic, very natural. And I think even if you weren't paying attention, I don't think you knew that they weren't weighing them on the scales until the last day. And I talked with Gene Gilliland from Bass, who just is the guy when it comes to this. And he said he was very nervous about this event coming in, obviously with the water, with the air temperatures, 100 degrees, and that it went extremely well as far as the fish and how the anglers did it and the health of the fish and the fishery. So working with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and Bass, I thought that was is that the way they need to do it from now on? Or?
I don't think so.
No, especially earlier in the year, those fish are healthy.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have some pictures, and I don't know what happened to them, of the procedure that those guys were going through. There's actually a member of the Texas Department of Wildlife, one of the biologists, is actually a BTL fan, came up to me, said, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. We're going to try and get him on the show also to explain the whole entire process. And he actually had some photos that he sent to me. So we'll try and get him on, and forgive me for not having his name. But, good dude, good BTL fan. And speaking of BTL fans, the number of people that came up to us during the show. Folks, I'm telling you guys are the greatest fans in the world. Matt and I appreciate all the support. And after we have our guest on in Chris Zaldain, we'll dive a little bit into a number of the questions that are on the instant feedback and also on the YouTube comments about our thoughts on the weigh-in, the Fox Sports situation, which was very, very, very unfortunate. And the guys that had to talk through that delay was enormously challenging, and some of the stuff that they did, they really pulled it off. And we'll dive into that and really kind of give you guys our take on what went down the 3 days in Fort Worth. But it is time to take a break, come back with our special guest. And he had the HFA, Matt. Did he not?
It is. He did 100%. And I've always said, and I've talked to these guys, and they'll say there's a lot of guys that at the bottom that have, they do what they think they need to do to win it.
Yeah.
And they don't care whether they're 6th or 7th or 40th or 41st. So it'll be interesting to see if Chris thinks he made a mistake or if he's at peace with it. Hey, man, I did what I thought I needed to do. I caught a 7-pounder on the first day. I put my homework in. I know where these big fish live, and it just didn't happen for me.
Yeah. All right. Coming back with Chris Zaldain here on a Monday. Everybody stay tuned.
The ultimate fishing system starts with Lowrance HDS Live. The best fish finding tools, from chirp sonar and fish reveal to active imaging and new active target live sonar, and complete touchscreen control from your trolling motor to your big motor. For a limited time, building the ultimate fishing system will be easier on your wallet. Upgrade to HDS Live with a Ghost trolling motor, active target sonar, or live sight sonar, and save up to $800.
Basscat's legendary 20-foot platform has been paired with angler-approved accessories for 2021. Puma FTD features the proven hull used by many of the top names in bass fishing today, backed by a transferable lifetime warranty. The Puma FTD boasts a full team deck concept which enhances efficiency for you and your tournament partners. Turnkey tournament winning performance. The Puma FTD SP from Basscat.
Pro-inspired, pro-designed, tested and proven by legends on the water, dominating the tournament trail for over 50 years. Everything you need, one legendary brand. Strike King.
Hey guys, Major League Fishing Pro, Jacob Wheeler here with my new Signature Series line of rods with Duck It Fishing. We have my 7.2 cranking rod right here. Crankbaits can be very fickle, and having the right, having a lot of tip can be too much, and having not enough tip can, lose a lot of fish. So you really got to be careful. If there's one or two techniques that I'm really adamant about having the perfect action as a crankbait, especially like a square bill, a DT6, those medium running crankbaits in the springtime when those fish's mouth are pretty tough. That's when I'm really on top of having my actions just perfect.
Let's face it, fishing electronics are no longer an afterthought. They've become a necessity. And at the Bass Tank, our experts match you with the right electronics, provide professional installation, and educate you to help maximize your catching results while providing support along the way. Because let's be honest, it's about catching, not just fishing. And when you're ready for better results, join the Bass Tank team. Visit us today on Facebook or go to thebasstank.com.
You've been waiting all week for this, and Sunline wants to make sure you're ready for it with bulk spools of all your favorite fishing lines.
That's so fun.
Bulk up with Sunline.
All right, we are back. First day after the Bassmaster Classic that took place in the DFW area, and it is a treat to have our next guest on BTL, our first after the Classic, and it's pretty cool that he is willing to come on, Matt.
Heck yeah, man. I mean, I couldn't imagine all that both Chris and Trait did leading up to. They did a lot with the city of Fort Worth, and they had like a half-hour tour thing that they put out, and then just very, like I said, the guy's been going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then to do this the morning after, he's been off the water but he was at the weigh-in at the Expo and stuff yesterday. It's
long lines.
I know how. Dude, like in a 40-boat Bass Nation tournament, I'm depressed for 2-3 days after that. I couldn't imagine what it feels like after a classic that you've been that jacked up on and then had to wait an additional 5 months after it was supposed to be. So to jump on with a smile on his face, big props for Chris for joining.
He always is smiling, man.
I know, but
I've
I
never
also
seen him
know
frown.
I also know what a competitor he is.
Yeah.
And he probably, I would think, let's ask him about decompressing after an event like this, because you put everything into it. And one of the things I always find interesting is you put everything into an event like this, a classic that you think you're going to be a favorite in, that you think you're dialed in. At Media Day, he said he thought he had the potential to catch a 30-pound bag, and it doesn't work out. Yeah. But then when it's over, you're like, oh, okay, there's life after this. I have to figure out what's next, because you're just going that next day at a time during those Bassmaster Classics. You don't know what the heck's going on in the world.
All right, let's bring him in. Chris, man, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, what's going on? BTL. I kind of like that idea, the decompression. Let's just make this like a therapy show. Why don't we do that?
Oh, believe me.
Without a doubt, I'm in a kind of the post-tournament hangover. It was so electrifying. I mean, I just looked at some of the photos and videos on my phone that I shot yesterday from a suite. My in-laws are, connected with the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we ended up renting one of the suites up there at Dickies Arena, and we had all our friends and family there. Unfortunately, I wasn't on the center stage there, but it was so cool to watch that. And, yesterday I got done with that expo, and man, that was like 3 hours of the most interaction I've had probably my whole life. Post COVID, everyone was being safe, courteous. There was a lot of hand sanitizer flying around. It was awesome. It was great. It was so good to see people from, not only from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but from the Carolinas, from all up north. A bunch of people from Michigan showed up, and from all over the country. So that was really cool to see. But after all that excitement and seeing Hank hoist that trophy again, and I was kind of worried. I was like wondering, what is he going to do? Like grab the trophy and hand it from his right hand to his left hand? But it was so cool to see Trick Weldon, hand off that trophy. Oh my gosh, that was so cool. But yeah, definitely this morning in a post tournament hangover, and I'm just sitting here reflecting. And I'm actually very fortunate to be waking up in my own bed, this week, and especially yesterday. So I didn't make the cut. We went for it, and the fishing was just so off and on. We can get into that here in a little bit. But when I didn't make the cut that Sunday morning, I woke up Sunday morning ready to go, 4 a.m. And normally when that happens, when I wake up and these guys are going to the lake and I'm sitting in my bed and just, oh man, I missed another cut or whatever it is. Normally it is so hard when you're on the road, because you got to, show up to the weigh-in, you got to drive home the next day or that night or whatever it is. But I'm already home. I'm waking up in my own bed. So it made it so much easier to kind of just, wake up and say, oh, okay, we get to go to the Expo today, which is just 30 minutes down the road from my house. So it was really easy. Same thing today. I wake up, there was a tournament. There was a Classic champion crowned last night. I'm waking up in my own home this morning. So it's just like, now it's like, just like you said, now what do we do? Now we plan out the next 2 weeks and try to finish the tournament season strong. But yeah, glad to be here, no doubt.
All right, Chris, simple question first. Everybody wants to know, including myself, what happened?
Yeah, man. I got asked that question so much yesterday. I'd shake a hand, sign an autograph, take a picture. Dude, what happened? I went for it, and I could honestly say in my heart, like I went for it. I did a lot of prep, lots and lots of prep for Lake Ray Roberts. Back in March, February, March, when everyone else was, prepping for the season or prepping for the Elite Series tournaments, I had some free time back in March, and before the Pickwick tournament, after the Pickwick tournament, and it went off limits April 5th and 6th. At that time, the water was normal. In years past, June is a normal water level kind of month. So I did a lot of prep, a lot of idling. I felt like I idled that whole stinking lake, and I was out there like every day for 7 or 8 days back in February and March. And I marked every pond dam, every hard bottom pond dam, every foundation, using, the Lake Master mapping. They showed like little house foundations, and they're not like exact. Like, it's not like you go and idle exactly over this GPS coordinate. You have to look around and really find the little points, the edges, the rock piles off of it. I had every one of those things marked, and I was ready to go and fish that, 12 to 18 foot zone where most of these foundations are. And, did my homework, blah, 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 did all that brush piles, all that stuff. And I was ready to go. And come tournament time, we got back from Lake Guntersville just 2 weeks ago. I come back home here and, okay, I'm ready to go. The Classic's in a week. Let's do this. And when I just cross over the border into Texas, coming from Guntersville 2 weeks ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, you could feel the humidity in the air. You could look at all the creeks and all the streams that you're driving over on I-20 coming over here. Like, dude, it has been raining nonstop here. And I know you guys have felt it too up there. And I'm like, oh boy, this is not looking good. And about that time, about 8 days before we hit the water, I looked at the water levels, and it was on the rise. It was about 2.5 feet high, like 8 or 9 days prior to the event. And we had more and more and more rain leading up to the event. And I'm just thinking about all these pond dams and all these foundations that are like rock solid in June, literally rock solid. You know, I'm just watching this water level go up and up and up. I'm like, oh boy, it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And, you know, with an already late season, remember Lake Ray Roberts back in February, you could literally, I almost laced up my skates just for a video's sake, just for a little bit of clout, just a little bit of clout, Matt Pangrass. I almost laced up my skates and skated across Lake Ray Roberts because you could have. The ice was so thick in some of those coves, I almost did it. So we're already late. We have this 4 foot sheet of water on top of this lake, and it's a fresh sheet of water. I mean, the water just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And, you know, the fish's brain, it's June, it's getting warmer. You know, some have spawned, maybe 10% of the fish haven't spawned yet, but they want to go out to the middle of the lake. I mean, that's just what they do in June in the North Texas area. But Mother Nature is pulling them back to the bank. Hey, Mother Nature, I'm going to put, you know, 4 feet of water in the bushes, in the brush. And dude, when you put the trolling motor on the bank during practice, like in your swimming a jig or whatever, you know, I was throwing a swim bait all through practice, and I knew that white swim jig thing would play. But you know, I was throwing a swim bait through those bushes in practice, and dude, you would see shad spraying everywhere. You would see a little fry, bass fry, shad fry, gar, carp, everything was shallow. And about halfway through the first day of practice, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, all of that preparation you did, Chris, in the off season, it ain't going to play. It is not going to play. I think I had 2 bites off the bank, like in that deeper 16 to 18 foot zone. And one was a spotted bass. The other one was like a 2.5 pounder, and it was like pale white, just a random fish. So I went closer to the bank, but not in the bushes, just a little bit closer in that 6 to 7 foot zone, and fished a couple little hard spots with some standing timber. You saw Steve Kennedy and Chad Pipkins fishing that kind of stuff. But I honestly thought after practice that was what, you know, the areas that we're going to take it home. So we'll call them the mid-range, just high spots with some timber on them. And that's kind of what I kind of targeted. You know, all through practice, all through the tournament, I knew I wasn't going to get very many bites. Like you go to the bushes and you could get a bunch of bites, but everyone was doing it, and I just couldn't bring myself to do what everyone else was doing. So did I get a little stubborn? Maybe, but I also honestly, I feel like I went for it, and I was looking for big ones that first day. And I will say about the only advantage I had after, you know, in my mind, I've got the biggest advantage, the home field advantage over anyone here. I've got all this stuff marked and this typical June stuff. The only spot that really paid off was just a little sneak spot that was real close to the takeoff area. And you guys saw me catch a 714 on it. And during practice, I took that big glide bait and I threw it. It was kind of like this one on the wall right here. That's a mother. It was similar to that, big wood and swim bait. And I threw it across this piece of structure, 20 feet of water, and the fish was suspended like in 5 or 6 feet of water. I threw it up there, and I was running the Humminbird Live at that time, Mega Live, and I could see that glide bait coming back and coming back and coming back. And I watched this blob come out and follow it. And then I looked in the water. The water was clear enough at the time, and I'm cranking this thing out, and I see this long sucker come out, and she wanted it. So I had to pull the glide bait away. Okay, I know she's at the end of this kind of piece of structure here. I'm going to come back to it the first day. And so I let everyone launch after the first day of takeoff. I went to a spot right around the corner for where Steve Kennedy started. I didn't catch anything, so I go back to that spot where I saw that big giant one. Throw that glide bait back in there with high hopes, and nothing. I'm like, oh, man, it was just a rogue fish. And then I'm like, you know what? If you haven't seen the clip, it's a really cool clip. It's on Bassmaster and their Instagram page. I'm like, you know what? When you have that little thought in your head and you just run with it. I had a big giant flutter spoon rigged up. You know, it's June. They love a flutter spoon. And I open up the rod locker. I pull that thing out, and, you know, every knots were beautiful. Hooks were sharp, everything. And I made one flip to where that fish kind of was. And I'm following it down. It's fluttering, doing its thing on that piece of cover, and 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm like, oh boy! And I set the hook, and I thought I snagged the cover that was there of the piling. Thought I snagged it, and all of a sudden, it just starts moving. I'm like, oh boy! Mm-hmm. We both flipped it, and the boat is a 714, and that's the kind of start you need for the Classic. Unfortunately, it kind of led me down a road to where it was just like, okay, I know spots similar to this. All of them were off the bank, out of the bushes, and I just got led down that road and with high hopes of catching a 30-pound sack, like a literal 30-pound sack. I've done it many times on Ray Roberts before. Just got pulled down that road, and every time I'm driving down the lake, you see, Chris Jones flipping the bank. You see, John Cox on some of these stretches, and you see all the hammer flippers. And they're on the same stretch as you like fishing. It's just like, dude, how can I flip behind John Cox? How can I flip behind a Scott Canterbury? How can I flip behind a Corey Johnson, who was on one of my favorite stretches? And mentally, it's like, dude, you can't flip behind these guys and weigh a huge sack. You got to keep doing your thing. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But I really feel like, I went for it, and that's just how tournament fishing is. That's how the Bassmaster Classic is. And going to the winner, Hank Cherry did an excellent job at doing pretty much what most of the guys were doing, flipping bushes, flipping willow trees, fishing a chatterbait style bait through there. And he had like a flawless tournament. Maybe he lost one fish, Matt. I'm not sure, but he had a flawless tournament. He was fishing around a crowd. Some guys were fishing the same stretches. He just got the bites, and he threw in that second punch, that 1-2 punch, and he did do the jerkbait thing on the dam, and that's always good to see. And you need that. You need that to win, and he definitely did that. So hats off to him, and very deserving.
Matt?
One of the things that I thought was interesting, and this was kind of talking to some locals who weren't in the tournament but that fish Ray Roberts regularly, was it seemed like, and the guys talked about this after the tournament in the media room. I talked to some guys behind stage about it, was that there were a lot of guys that were fishing the same water. And there's kind of two arms to it, but the locals were saying historically the bigger bags come out of the other arm, where like a couple guys were. I think Jordan Wiggins had a good bag there the first day and didn't the second day. But why do you think that area played more than what the locals historically thought the other arm, where more of the bigger fish would come from, just really wasn't a factor?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you were to ask any of the Dallas-Fort Worth anglers, bass fishermen around here, within a 30-mile radius of Lake Ray Roberts, you asked them prior to the tournament, where's it going to be won? They're going to tell you Indian Creek, Wolf Creek, Buck Creek. And just like in the TTBC several years ago, we saw, Matt Herron fish the Buck Creek area, the Wolf Creek area, the Indian Creek area. And it's basically two arms. It's just like this. It's just like a lake fork. It's your quintessential North Texas lake. There's an arm up here. There's an arm up there. And they just call them little branches in between. The east side of the lake, that east branch, very, very treacherous. Dude, there were guys running over the tops of trees that they had no clue were there. Full of 4 feet of water on top of them. It's fine. That's fine and everything, but very, very treacherous, very dangerous at normal pool. So that means that whole east arm, there's a lot more bass habitat. There's a little bit more kind of harder bottom. And there's just more timber, trees, creek channel bends. There's just more bass habitat, in the locals' opinion, on that east arm. A little more grass, and many, many tournaments are won out of that east arm. The west arm at normal pool, less timber, less wood, less hard bottom, less bass habitat, to be honest, and at normal pool. Now, 4 feet of water high, that whole west arm that is not typically very good, or doesn't yield a lot of big bags. 4 feet of water in the bushes. Think about it. Whatever fish live in that west arm have no choice but to go into the bushes. Hey, that is fresh cover. There's bait fish up there. There's shad up there. So pretty much all the fish that were living in that west arm, whether they live offshore a little bit or on the bank, they had all that flooded brush, and all those guys. not knowing the history of Lake Roberts. Hey, Lake Ray Roberts. Hey, this arm is easy to get around in. It looks great. The wind is blowing into it. They did very, very well in that west arm, which isn't typically the arm that yields big bags. So it was really a flip flop kind of thing, and honestly, that kind of hurt a guy like me, and who knows the history kind of that lake. And I stayed in that east arm where it normally goes down. So that's definitely an interesting kind of topic there. That west arm definitely showed out when it wasn't, supposed to.
One more quick question then. How many guys do you think fished the dam? We saw, I mean, you look back at the classic stuff. I always do this BMR square thing. You see, what Randy Howell did on Rip Rap with the deal there at Guntersville, and then Hank Cherry last year. And if you're a casual fan, you're looking at it and you're like, well, I mean, you go down the dam and you know where you're going to throw. You throw a jerk bait. Like, how is everyone not going up and down the dam catching these fish? Now, I know that wasn't his entire bag, but he caught some quality fish doing that. Was that something that everyone went down, or what's the deal with the dam there, and why were there not more guys that were keen on that pattern?
So, yeah, the dam at Lake Ray Roberts is exactly like the dam at Lake Louisville. And Lake Louisville is just the next lake down on that Trinity River system. You've seen in the Bass Opens where guys absolutely maul them on the dam. And what you have is little just kind of irregularities on the dam where they built that stuff, where maybe rocks fell off the edge just a little bit more, and it creates bald spots or like little rock points. But yeah, the dam, any dam in Texas plays, especially when the spawn is a little bit later, like it is this year. Talking about water temperatures in the near 80s. Matter of fact, sidebar, the first cove off the dam, I saw a 6-pound bass spawning with a 3-pound bass on the first day of practice. And it was right there within inside of the dam, and I'm just like, this is all screwed up. This is so weird type of thing. So when Hank reports catching jerkbait fish on the dam that were pre-spawned, beautiful smallmouth spots and largemouth, I'm like, I don't know how you did that. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The only thing he had going against him was that south wind. This is a south dam, so the wind was blowing over the dam into the lake. If he had like a north-northwest or north-northeast wind blowing onto that dam, I mean, he would have won by a lot. It would have pushed all those bait fish right on the face of that dam and that deep diving jerkbait that he loves throwing. He may have had 20 pounds a day if it were blew out of the north like that. So, but he got the job done anyway. But yeah, that dam thing it's time consuming. It's a really long dam. There's one little off limits area, the pump house that pumps the water down to Lake Louisville. That's all off limits, but he just stayed on the Rip Rap and caught a few doing that.
Chris, you mentioned it earlier, fish spawning. The water temp was in the 80s, wasn't it? Right. I've been covering this game a long time. I haven't seen that happen too many times. But what is up with these fish spawning in 80-degree water?
It's so crazy. It is so crazy. With the job Texas Parks and Wildlife does with conservation and the Share Lunker program with all of these lakes in Texas, I would really like to see a study on some of these like late spawns like this. I know it would be a special project for some of the biologists out here, but I would love to see exactly how far into the season they will spawn with like that water temperature. Obviously, like I saw them in practice again, that first day of practice, I believe it was a Friday. They were spawning, rubbing. I've got a video on my phone. I'm just sitting there watching. I put the sunglasses, put it over the lens on my phone. I'm like, and I sent it to my wife, Trey. I'm like, can you believe this? Look at this. And it was the stupidest thing ever. And I could have caught both of them, but I kind of was hoping that they would stick around for a week, but that never happens. But yeah, I mean, I think at that day it was like 74 degrees. So, I mean, I was shocked at that, but darn well with all these pre-spawn fish they're catching, these fish are spawning right now as we speak. They're spawning this morning in some of those buck brushes. I'd love to see a study or just kind of a tracking or something with how late some of these big Texas bass spawn. Because like you mentioned earlier, man, some of these fish that are flipping out of the bushes, fat, healthy, not a single mark on them. And then that 714 I caught was a post spawn fish, but like it had to be fizzed. It was the weirdest thing. Oh yeah, and here's a shout out to Texas Parks and Wildlife. it was kind of turning on its side. When I put it in the live well, it was doing great, but by the end of the day, it was kind of turning on its side. It looked like it kind of had an air bubble in it and everything. And I was a little worried. I'm like, man, an hour and 15-minute drive on I-35, this is going to be a little sketchy. Texas Parks and Wildlife came in like they were an ambulance crew, man, like pure oxygen bottle. Like we got off, I mean, like live well treatment, ice. They had these thermometers dipping in the tank. Okay, so it's exactly 23 degrees Celsius or whatever. That's perfect. Okay, no more ice, no more ice. Put a little more treatment in there, and let's pump it full of oxygen, pure oxygen. By the time I took that hour and 20 minute, it got stuck in traffic, hour and 20-minute ride back down to Dickey's Arena, I opened up the live one and was like, oh gosh, dude, did we kill this fish? I open it up and she's right side up. Her eyes have like just beautiful color in them. I'm like, man, they did an absolute good job after, after a long day of running and gunning and sloshing around in the live well. They did a phenomenal job taking care of those fish.
Matt,
did you see that, Mark? Like behind the stage, they literally had little canisters
O2 bottles,
of O2 bottles, and they'd come up and they'd look at the fish and then they'd put one in each live well for those fish. It was one of the coolest things that I'd ever seen.
They do a great job.
This classic turned out to be a lot tougher than a lot of the guys like me and Mark, and I think a lot of the anglers thought it would be, as far as coming in with 5 fish limits. When it was all said and done, there were just 4 anglers who caught a limit all 3 days of this classic. Did the bite, and then talking to some of the guys after practice, it seemed like a lot of guys were getting a lot of bites. You know, you hear Kennedy say that he had 18 bites in the first 2 hours and that shad spawn was super strong. Were you guys talking? Did you talk to anyone? What was the vibe as far as, I mean, you kind of know where you're standing and what's going on, but did you guys think it would be that tough to come in with 5 keepers in this classic?
No, at media day, most guys were talking. You know, they fed us lunch and everything at media day, which is, right before the tournament starts, and most guys were talking about, the few bites they were getting, but they were big ones. And then when they caught numbers, they were little ones, and they were related to the shad spawn. So it was very volatile. It was just very hit or miss. And I think the biggest thing that guys were talking about was just unknown. It really was. I mean, a lot of guys talk about, dude, I'm just going to go to where I had 1 or 2 bites, put the trolling motor down, and just kind of expand. Like literally put the trolling motor down and just stay along this bush row and just go that way or that way and just see what happens. And guys like Brock Mosley had several guys had great practices, but we're talking about, knowing the personality of Lake Ray Roberts, and I mentioned it earlier, and I had a really huge day in the spring and go back the next day, same conditions, same everything, and I only catch 1 fish. So it's a very flip-floppy lake. We talk about, flip-flop lakes, all over the country. This is probably the biggest one. It's so hard to be consistent here. And I think it's because of just the sheer numbers. There aren't a lot of bass in here, so that when they're feeding that day, the guy capitalizes on them that day, but more than likely they won't be there the next day. It's just the fish population. They don't move in huge schools. So unless there's kind of a shad spawn. And so that was just kind of the talks of that pregame there. Most of the guys, it was just very volatile. It was very unpredictable. And like I said, those guys, it actually surprised me, like a Matt Ari and a Hank Cherry, they were able to go to the exact same stretches and get 1 big bite here, 1 big bite there. But again, it was very surprising seeing these guys fishing on top of each other and still catching them out of the exact same bushes day after day after day.
Did you look at this, Mark? Did you look at the standings of the guys who just missed the cut? So we'll start with 26, which would have been Hunter. These are their day 1 weights. 15-14, 15-14, 13-6, 12-11, 16-3, 12-12. These are their day 2 weights. 4-15, 4-12, 7-4, 7-5, 3-10, 6-13.
Yeah, but a lot of that was due to the delay because they missed the shad spawn.
That's right. That's right.
A big reason.
It is. And in most of the fisheries in June, in Texas, in Oklahoma, anywhere in the South, really, that's kind of typical for an early summer. shad spawn or not, like normally it's an early morning bite. You know, it really is. And when Mother Nature snatches that away from you and hits you with lightning, I mean, that just completely decimates that whole morning bite. And guys scrambled. Guys absolutely scrambled. It was so weird. You would think, like, as a professional bass fisherman, and I've been doing this a long time now, you would think, you know, kind of those shad spawn stretches you had, you would think you could just slow down. Okay, tell yourself, slow down, and I'm going to flip every leaf or every corner in these bushes and just slow down, finesse fish, you know, and get a few bites. It just wasn't like that, man. They were either in the bushes or they were not, you know, type of thing. And those guys really struggled. Those guys really struggled that morning.
Hey, I want to circle back. What time of the day did you catch that 714?
I think it was about I think it was just before 8 o'clock. It was my second stop of the morning. We blasted off at 6:15. It was about 7:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having said that, and this is really a teaching moment for the fans out there, did that message that was sent and how you kind of analyzed what took place when you did catch that 714, did that hurt you? Did you react the wrong way based upon catching a 7-pounder?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So in my mind, that spot where I caught that 714, in my mind, I had like 6 other spots that set up like that spot. And it was just a mid-range, hard bottom, little, you know, hard cover. This happened to be a piling, you know, like a piling, cement piling. But I had spots with a hard bottom, mid-range, and cedar trees like that where they stack up good and they get on those spots and feed on larger than normal lures. I honestly think that 714 wouldn't have bit a jerkbait, wouldn't have bit a worm, any of that stuff. They feed on white bass, they feed on crappie, those big giant largemouth, post-spawn largemouth. And I had, as soon as that fish bit, 7:30 in the morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got 6 other spots that set up just like this. You know, it was so far from the main river channel, and I had all these 6 other spots just lined out, ready to go, and I rotated through there. The wind was good, everything was great, but nothing. And then, you know, all of a sudden it's 12:30, 1 o'clock running this, you know, big fish stuff, and we're throwing a big swim bait and spoon and all that, and just no bites. So yes, it did take me down a wrong path. I made an Instagram post that night saying, man, I really went for it. Tomorrow we're going to spend a little more time in the bushes. And then when tomorrow actually came around, it's like I went to the bushes. Again, I was fishing behind Corey Johnson. I was fishing behind Onum Robertson. Yep. And, you know, those guys are fishing so slow and thorough. Like, how do you fish behind a guy? And then I just got pushed back out to the bank and just said and told myself, hey, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out off the bank in this mid-range. Very similar to what Steve Kennedy was doing. Very, very similar. Very similar to what Chad Pipkins was doing, he caught like 2 7s and an 8 or something throughout the week doing that. And, you know, I honestly thought that was how you were going to win it. But again, 4 feet of water in the bushes, it was just hard not to beat that. It was very hard to beat that kind of approach.
Yeah. All right, Matt.
Easy to get over one like this? Easier than, you know, saying you were closer, you made wrong decisions. I mean, is this one where you were like, dude, I put all my eggs in one basket, it didn't turn out that way? I mean, how long does this one stick in your gut?
Yeah, it was kind of like elongated throughout the week. It all started when I was, you know, those 8 days before the Classic started, when I was driving over those bridges and I saw all that water running in the area. You know, I'm just like, dude, this water level. And I kind of came to terms with it right then and there. I wasn't completely out of the game, but it was just like, dude, that advantage you thought you had, like, is completely gone now. So it kind of transpired throughout the whole duration of the week, where it just slowly, you know, the confidence slowly swept, you know, just kind of swam away. But I was getting enough big bites on that medium range stuff to keep me out there. But I came to terms with it on that first day, second day, after catching the big one, that, man, this pattern isn't very strong. It really isn't that strong. And you hear the guys talking about, you know, catching big ones in the bushes. It's just couldn't bring myself to do it. But again, honestly, in my heart, I really felt like I did everything I could do to win a little bit differently. But it didn't work out. So yeah, it stings, but I'm totally over it. Waking up in my own bed, this morning, it makes it a lot easier.
Hey, how tough is it not to do the obvious?
Gosh, half of your brain is telling you, hey, if these world-class anglers like, Clark Wendlandt, if him and world champion Hank Cherry, if these guys are doing it, it's got to be worth something. Those bushes got to be worth something. And you think about, like, in practice too, it's like, dude, I totally thought, and I texted Zona. I'm like, dude, he was asking me, how's it going? And I go, dude, if Hackney or Christie qualified for this one, they'd probably finish 1 and 2 because there's that much water in the bushes. There's that much water in the bushes, and those guys are world-class, bush flippers and everything. But it's so hard to tell yourself, man, everyone's doing this. Let's just do something else. Let's break the mold and do something else. And that's what I opted to do that, man. It was kind of, I guess it was kind of nutsy and everything, but it was a coin flip, man. It could go really, 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 really well, or really, really, really sucky. And that coin flip went the opposite way yesterday.
All right. Do we need to have, what's your thoughts on this, Chris? Do we need to have more summertime classics? Was it a good thing? Is it something that needs to be rotated around? Do you think the fans showed up more because it was a summertime classic? What are your thoughts?
Dude, there were a bunch of young people there, and I loved seeing that. The kids are out of school. And, dude, it was awesome. It was awesome. I mean, I couldn't believe it. We're post-COVID and post-lockdown, I should say. And people were out and about, man. It was so cool to see that, summer, everyone was in shorts and sandals and comfortable. That Expo floor was just cracking like crazy. And I like it, man. I like it. I like, most families, normal families, working families, most of them, take the opportunity to travel somewhere in the summertime, right? Summer break. Let's go to the Bassmaster Classic. It's mid-June. Perfect. You can fly into DFW. I think it all worked out great this week. And I think a lot of vendors, sponsors, staff, anglers, and we were all quite surprised with the turnout, because I know a lot of us were worried. We were absolutely worried at what the turnout would be, but we were all floored. Every single one of us, we were all floored. And I would love to keep the classic in the summer. I like it. It's very grueling. Reminds me of that U.S. Open tournament out there out west, during those summer months. It's a very, very grueling tournament. You saw the look on the guy's face on Sunday where it got really hot and humid. Those guys look beat, man. They got beat, and you don't get a lot of sleep or downtime, anyway. But those guys were smoked, and but I like it. I mean, that's about the only drawback is just the heat and dealing with it. But hey, it adds another element to competition, and I really like that style.
Yeah. All right, Matt.
Did you feel overwhelmed at all when we did the classic odds? I said that I thought maybe you had a little bit too much on your plate, that you had put too much, not too much, but that you would put your heart and soul into this tournament and the city of Fort Worth and Dallas, and felt a little bit obligation as a host. And I know you and Trait were doing a bunch, and I said I think that might carry over into the tournament a little. In hindsight, it did. No, it did. You're not human if you could sit there and say, hey, there's a lot of weight. I'm the hometown guy. There's a lot of, your phone's blowing up all week long. But it's all good. Like, that's great. Like, I love that. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't want to be the guy that's in the 54 angler field that's just kind of sitting there, and I could focus everything on fishing. I like it when it's busy and hectic and all that. I really do. I felt really calm this week. I did. As soon as the motor hit the water, I felt really calm, and I thought about fishing while I was fishing. Like, that's it. I mean, I didn't think about anything else. I think I did an okay job. Trait as well. She took care of everything off the water. I think I did an okay job of getting all that stuff lined out before game time. Game day happened. The only thing I was behind on was really just tackle prep. And that's always something. And Matt, you're a type of guy that loves rigging a million rods and everything. And I had family staying over at the house here, so that you have to entertain them.
As soon as you get back, you can't sit there and have a cold drink with a family unless the tackle's done. So all that stuff needs to be done first. And I thought staying at home would get me ahead of that curve, but it definitely did not. So 50-minute drive north to the lake in the morning, and then an hour down Dickey's Arena, and then when we got done weighing in, it was only a 30-minute drive back to my house. But that kind of little triangle there, I mean, that's a 2-hour triangle of travel. When normally your routine is, okay, here's the boatyard, here's the boatyard is for rigging and prep. The hotel is for, sleeping and cocktails, and there's the lake for fishing. And it's like you allocate your time and, okay, I'm not going to leave the boatyard until everything is done. Okay, you leave there, you go to the hotel. It's a system, that you come up with after fishing a few of these classics. And this time around, you throw your home element into it, your whole family and everything else going on. So, yeah, it was like 2X or 3X the responsibilities and things going on this week. So I could tell you in my head it didn't bother me, not, affect me. But physically, I think it did. I think it did a little bit.
All right, man. You've been doing this game quite some time now. I remember the first time we had you on the show.
Yeah.
You talked about quitting your job and you were going to make the move and everything. I want to know, what did you learn this week on the water that you really, really learned that's going to improve your game?
Man, and it's the same thing every single time. Fish with an open mind. It's the same lesson every time, Matt. It's the same
change
thing.
it. What are you doing,
it's so hard. It's so hard.
It is.
It's so hard. It's the same
Well,
lesson.
like Chris said, I mean, your open mind,
Every
Is
time.
it a closed mind or an open mind? Are you closed-minded if you're like, oh, I got to go up in the bush because the water's up high? You can say, I'm keeping an open mind by keeping this crazy pattern alive. Or you can say, I'm closed-minded because I'm not going to go up into the bushes. Going into the bushes would be an open mind. Six one way, half dozen the other. And then you're out in the water by yourself for practice days for 14-hour days and no one's talking to you. And it's just going in your head. And is that kind of what you went through?
It's so crazy. This is really good. Rick Clunn called me before the tournament started, practice started, and I thought he was, and I missed the call. I'm like, oh crap, Rick Clunn called me. He doesn't call me that often, and I missed the call, and I'm like, oh man, I need to call him back, and so I call him back, and oddly enough, he was asking me about glide baits, and it was about him going up north for the northern swing and wanting to fish glide baits at Champlain and the St. Lawrence River. So I thought that was kind of odd. I'm like, oh wow, you're not calling about the classic or anything? And he's like, no, I'm just calling to see what, where, what, how, and which ones and all that. I'm like, yeah, cool. So-and-so, this is the one. I'll send you pictures of the one I really like, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, he goes, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm practicing for the classic, in a couple of days and everything. And I go, man, we've had some rain around here. And he goes, well, the only thing I can tell you, I've been doing it a long time, obviously, is fish the now. Fish now. Fish what is going on now, and don't go off of, what, this guy or that guy told you is happening, last week or last year, or how this lake is supposed to fish. Don't go off of that. Go off of what is now. And that is being open-minded in a nutshell. That is it. And when you hear it from his mouth, it really makes you think about it during practice and fish the now. I mean, fish what is going on now. And what did I do? I fished not the now. I fished something else.
Well, I mean, you want to look at the now.
Yeah.
You're 32 points outside the Classic right now. It's going to be at Hartwell next year. You're going up north where you have experience. But, dude, you legit have a lot of work to do to get in that Classic cut for next year.
Yeah, so I don't know if you heard, and it's I don't know if it's I don't think it's confidential, but
it's a weird
we get a COVID drop. David Fritz, he was out with COVID one tournament. So what that does is it allows the rest of the field to drop their lowest finishing tournament towards, I think it's Classic and Angler of the Year qualification. So I've racked up a couple like 80th place finishes, but that takes away one 80th place finish, and it actually jumps me up like 2 or 3 spots in the classic qualification.
Takes away a 94th.
94th, sorry, 92. That's bad. So it takes away 94th, and it actually moves me up. So dropping your lowest finishing tournament really helps me out this year. We had 2 5ths. So that kind of jumps me up. Prior to last week's event, I needed I think 2 top 20s or 3 top 20s. Sorry, so we did that, and now we just need 2 like top 27s. I think is what it is, and I've done it before up north. So the classic is not something you want to miss. And they got the participation. I mean, this isn't the, this is really cool to have, no doubt. I mean, everyone gets these. It says your name on it and everything. And I've only got 6 of them here out of this is my 9th season. I only got 6 here. So I missed 3 classics in my career. But whenever you've got this in your bag of goodies, your swag bag, during Night of Champions, I mean, that's so cool. Just to have an opportunity, it could have been worse. It could have been worse this week. I could have been fishing another circuit, working the Expo. I could have not been here at all. I could have been at home watching it all unfold. But to make Lake Hartwell, we're gonna have to make some big moves at Lake Champlain. I think largemouth will play a little more just because we're there earlier. I think largemouth and grass. I think that'll be really cool to see at Champlain. And then the St. Lawrence River, I love that place. I got a lot of spots accumulated over the year, and a lot of different smallmouth techniques will play at those 2 tournaments. So we're looking for a top 20 these next 2 tournaments to make that classic for next year.
All right, cool. Anything else, Matt?
No, that's it. Thanks for jumping on and doing this.
Yeah, man.
That's really big of you, man.
Great talking points. I appreciate it, boys. Yeah, now I got to go drive over to Lake Fork today. We're doing a Humminbird Mega Live kind of video shoot. So all the Humminbird guys that had Mega Live, there was 8 of us that had it, and fish were in the bushes, so it wasn't like it wasn't a huge player. But we're gonna go out to Lake Fork where those fish suspend out there in those trees, and we're gonna go play with it today and tomorrow. So we got that, and then we got some time off. So. Matt, let's go fishing.
I hear you. Hey, give us a plug. Where can we get those sunglasses that you've made famous this year?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, so the whole Pit Viper thing got real popular with some of the kids these days. And the sunglass company that Trait was working with, so she's got her line of sunglasses in Walmart. They kind of like the husband-wife thing, and they wanted to come up with a sunglass for men and everything, and Optic Nerve. So it's Optic Nerve eyewear. You just Google that, and it's called a Zaldangerous Fixie Max. There's a Zaldangerous lens. It's a polarized lens. It's actually really sick. I'll be honest with you. I was a little apprehensive at first, but when they first sent the samples, like I purposely grabbed my jersey and my shirt, and I was like trying to scratch the lenses, because that's what we do, right? When we wipe them off, we're using a dirty shirt or whatever it is, and there's 0 scratches on it. So scratch resistance and polarization is awesome. And it covers, look at my tan line. Like it covers all of that right there. Yeah. So it's cool. They're definitely very protective, and it's just the kids are loving it. There was a couple guys with it on the floor yesterday that showed me. It was.
I saw it. Well, I lost that prop bet to Jeffries. The prop bet was, will Chris wear the shades on stage during the weigh-in at some point? And Mark said no, and I thought you would, but Gussie did wear sunglasses and a cowboy hat at the same time, which were both prop bets.
And how Canadian! It was so Canadian of him to Mercer goes, yeah, do you want a picture of those fish or hold up those fish? He's like, oh no, I just I don't want to hold up the fish. I just want a picture of you and Trip. And that's so Canadian of him. It's to kind of double arm the two, and they're so nice. Such a nice guy. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much. I know it's a tough day, but looking forward to see what you do the next couple of events. And thanks so much for coming on BTL. You're always welcome.
Always, man. Cool.
Big fan, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care, Chris. All right. There you have it, folks. Chris Zaldain. And, man, to come on the show after a very difficult decision. The interesting thing from that interview is he continues to do the same thing that he wished he could do over and over. That must be a very, very difficult thing to overcome.
That's the blessing and a curse, a double-edged sword, whatever. You know what I mean? When it's one of those things that when it works out, guys like me and you go, well, that's why. Yeah. It's because he sticks with his guns when it's non-traditional, and when it doesn't work out, we go, why weren't you in the flooded bushes, Chris? Yeah. So it's his style. That's why he's gone 65th, 5th, 65th, 5th. There's certain guys who do that and certain guys who make it work.
Yeah.
It's a high risk, high reward.
It is. All right, we're going to take a break. Our final break, come back and summarize what we thought about the 2021 Bassmaster Classic. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Big companies get bigger and bigger and talk about their fancy labs where they study fish behavior, but then they all go golfing on the weekend. We don't have a large laboratory to test baits. Why, you ask? We don't need a big laboratory because our pros fish, our employees fish, our salespeople fish, our suppliers fish, our mold builders fish, our owners fish, and our kids fish. This is our laboratory. Our R&D comes from time on the water, learning how to make fish bite. All that time on the water brings us thousands of hours of testing new products and improving current ones for all species.
All of us on the Pro Tournament Trail use Gamakatsu hooks.
Why?
Because they are absolutely the best.
It's not about how many bites you get.
It's how many you put in the boat.
Gamakatsu makes hooks for every fishing style.
We didn't come this far to lose fish.
Did you?
For more information, visit gamakatsu.com.
Utilizing my experience, utilizing my time on the water, evolving as an angler, and that evolution should never stop. You have to do it every day. From when you wake up in the morning, you got to be thinking about changing, continually changing every minute, every cast. That's really the premise of fishing the moment.
Everyone, Brandon Polnick here. People always be asking me what I got tied on. I'm like, X-Zone lures. And they're like, Brandon, why you got X-Zone lures tied on? And I'm like, let me show you why.
The bite.
Get out of there. Get out of there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's freaking digging.
Get in here.
Oh, God.
Giant. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
I think you get the point.
Guys, what makes our Spro lures beat the competition?
I mean, you have to admit, we nailed it with my McSticks and rock crawlers.
Man, we've all won money on my plugs.
My Wamic shot put fish in my boat. One thing's for sure, we all count on our Spro lures to beat the competition.
Designing cutting-edge baits with some of America's top anglers. Spro lures beat the competition. To see the entire lineup, visit a retailer near you or spro.com.
The Ned rig. What rod should I be using with the Ned rig? My favorite is the Denali Lithium multi-spin rod. It's our 7'4" length, great Ned rig rod. It's got a great sensitive tip on it. It's long enough where I can make long casts, which you're usually fishing clear water with a Ned rig, and it's got enough backbone to get those fish in. So check it out, Denali Lithium Series 7'4" multi-spin.
All right, we are back on a Monday, wrapping things up. First day after the Bassmaster Classic. And real quick, I want to give a shout out to Coach Cameron Berger. Do you know who that is? Any idea who that is? Who's he coach for?
Sounds familiar.
He is the head coach for East Texas Baptist University.
Okay.
You know what East Texas Baptist University did?
Did they win the college?
Whatever tournament they had. Yeah. And I spent some time afterwards in the media room talking to him and asked him a couple questions. Then I asked him, I said, so can you tell me what your team GPA is? What do you think the response was?
I think he said yes.
Absolutely.
I think.
In fact, the two anglers were sitting right there, and he goes, listen, you have no idea how much academics are stressed at this program.
Mm-hmm.
And we dove in, and dude, many, many props to this coach and that program. Enormously impressed with the anglers, with the coach, with the program. So I was blown away. Now, on the flip side to that, as I was walking through the expo over the 3 days, I talked to 3 high school coaches and 3 college/university coaches. Out of 6, how many knew their team GPA?
2.
0.
Really?
Not a single one. So that's why I want to give props to Coach Berger, and great job with those kids, both on and off the water. And man, it was so pleasant to talk fishing and to talk what those guys want to do in their future, and the program and the structure that program has. We're actually going to try and get him on the show, maybe during the marathon show, but thoroughly impressed with those 2 gentlemen, and the coach was fantastic. So great job there. All right, man, what were your thoughts?
Overall, I thought that it was a very smooth classic, having to deal with the fact that it was rescheduled. It was during the summer. You were in a part of the country where you also had a NASCAR race going on and a bunch of other different shows. You had the hour-plus drive to the lake. You didn't have the 5 fish coming in on the first 2 days. You had the 2-hour fog delay on day 2. And as a whole, I think there were a lot of logistics that they overcame, and it seemed like it ran with a couple little glitches as far as, some air conditioning and some of the units,
really
which
hot.
we can talk about.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I felt like the classic was ran very... It was a smooth classic.
Mm-hmm.
There were no... Did you get that vibe too?
I did. And I think the communications people, the media communications people did a fantastic job. The support that Emily and everybody involved with that did a great job, fantastic job. Elo, Eric Lopez, I'm sure he was stressed out a little bit.
Very stressed out, probably.
Yeah, there were some big challenges to be overcome because of the way that certain buildings were set up with not having air conditioning in there. But originally, obviously, when it was scheduled, it probably would have been very pleasant in there. I think they tried to do the best that they could, but it was a very tall task to overcome.
And I'm not even sure that that's where it originally was going to be. I think that there was maybe another section of it it originally was going to be in March when it was, but that was already booked for this week. So they did the best that they could do out of it. I thought the expo was set up very well. I thought it was well attended, but also, you go to some of the expos and you get in there and it just feels like you get pushed past it, or there's too crowded and you can't interact and talk with people. And I feel like you and I both, when you got in a booth, it seemed the way it was spread out and the way it's set was, it was very easy to interact with people who were attending it, to look at what was going on, to get one-on-one time with the people there. Didn't feel confined, like you were able to have your space in the world that we live in now. I mean, regardless, it's just, that's something you notice now, right?
Yeah.
And I never felt like we were packed in anything that much.
There were definitely more people in the buildings that had the air conditioning.
Right.
And that was why it was really kind of tough to gauge, because those people that were in the non-air conditioned buildings were troopers.
Yeah,
the exhibitors, the fans. I'm telling you, man, they went through adversity to give the fans what they want and showcase their products and services that they had. I think that was a big challenge. Let me ask you this. I was very observant. Who do you think had the largest line, at least during the time that I saw. What angler do you think had the largest line?
The two that I saw that had the largest line were Bill Dance and Hank Parker.
Bill Dance had a massive line.
Absolutely, and so did Hank Parker.
All right, now for current anglers, who had the longest line that you saw?
Gerald Swindle.
All right, KVD's line was massive.
I didn't see KVD's line.
Yeah, massive. That was on Friday. And then guess who else had a massive line? Edwin Evers. It wrapped around twice. And I stood there and I watched Kevin interact with the fans, and it was priceless. I watched Edwin interact with the fans. It too was priceless. The time that both of those guys took to interact with the fans, it wasn't just like you were running fans through the assembly line or anything like that. They took as much time as each fan wanted.
I did notice there seemed to be a lot of interaction with the anglers. I noticed that with Randy Howell. Randy Howell was always, at the booth, so he was always talking to people like that. Same with Josh Bertrand, a number of them. It seemed like there were a lot of, instead of just sign the hat and move on, a lot of guys got to kind of meet and talk with some of their angling heroes and guys that they respect.
Bill Dance going to be 81 this year, man.
That's impressive as hell.
And he was looking, not the best, but still had a lot of liveliness to him. But man, the guy's been doing it forever. And I don't know how many more shows, how many more classics that we're going to be able to see Bill Dance in the the way that he was presenting himself. He's still Bill Dance, man, and his personality.
Now he's got that song with Luke Bryan.
I know.
Have you heard that one yet?
Oh yeah,
it's good.
Yeah.
Hank looked good. Hank's still Hank. He was standing up, signing, doing the thing with the smile.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's crazy when you think about Hank Cherry. What is it? Rick Clunn, Kevin Van Dam, and Jordan Lee.
Yeah.
The only three other guys who have won back to back. And one of the things about this classic is this is in June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. You kind of get shorted for that next guy, a couple months and a little bit of a wraparound classic year. Well, no, you don't, because the guy gets to keep the trophy, so he actually gets to have it. But then you go back and you look at his stats, and he's, like you said, he's won an All-Star event or the 50. He's got the Rookie of the Year stuff, but he doesn't have a regular season Elite Series win.
Let me ask you this.
And he's got 2 Bassmaster Classics.
All right, here's the jerkbait. Does he move the needle?
Yeah, I think Hank moves the needle on that. I think Hank moves the needle on that technique.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, the guy did something that a lot of people. How often have we talked about over the last 10 years on this show? Why do we put the jerkbait down?
Yeah.
I mean, do we not talk about that? We've had people on. We talk about it at all. I mean, it's a wounded bait fish. Do they stop eating the wound? No, they're just, you have to target. But it's also interesting. We talk about fishing your strengths and your comfort zone, and it's crazy how he's been able to find that in the last couple classics, and how he's made that kind of shallow water power fishing flipping his comfort zone. Because I remember when he was fishing on Toledo Bend several years ago, he was like, I don't flip. I'm not a flipper.
Yeah.
And he made an adjustment. Chris Jones made an adjustment too. The guys who finish at the top made an adjustment in the bushes. And that hasn't really been talked about as a whole, but they lightened up their stuff. Chris Jones went from a tube to a Christie Critter to tube. What Hank did was he went to a lighter weight, a 1/4 ounce, 15-pound test. He mixed up his bait a little bit and then went bam, bam, bam. Does this happen if he sticks with the same flipping setup he had? Did those adjustments make a difference? Did he just hit that bush, a little differently? But just little adjustments within the pattern that the majority of the guys at the top were doing, and execution and sticking with your strengths. He's got it figured out. And you said it before, Mark. You said it in the odds. Why was Hank high even though this wasn't going to suit his? He's a gamer. Yeah. That's what you said. You said this guy is a gamer. He figures out he's a gamer is what you used.
Did you see the prototype jig that Chris Jones was using?
I saw the one he held up with the white. Yeah, I didn't get to actually look at it.
It's coming out at ICAST. There is a group of anglers, and forgive me for not remembering the nickname that they have, on the Arkansas River.
Mm-hmm.
And that jig was really developed from the experience that these guys have on the Arkansas River. And it's pretty cool looking. And it's going to launch at ICAST, but from a prototype standpoint, this thing is it's pretty cool for a swim jig, man. It's really neat.
Where does Matt Airy, and I know Steve Kennedy finished like 12th in this thing, but like you said, he didn't weigh in limits. He lost one roughly 8 and roughly 5. We saw what happened with Airy. He's got that thing that's going to live. Hank even addressed it in his speech. Now, obviously, Matt Airy's a professional. He's been here. He's done this before. He'll be back. He is one of those guys who, it's not like he's a Bass Nation guy who will most likely never get that chance again and be like, oh my gosh, he's probably going to fish more classics. Would you not agree?
Yeah, he was really bummed at the
That's what
press
I'm saying, but
conference.
how do they recover from those lost fish and bounce back from it? Or is that something that, it affected Hank Cherry. He's talked about it before. He's still talking about it from 2013. Like, now I've got 2. That's in the past. That's on Matt, but he'll handle it now.
Lesson learned, man. That's what it is. And those guys are going to get opportunities to win at an Elite Series event, and they're going to get an opportunity to fish in the Classic again. That's why I asked Zaldain that question. What did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps making the same mistake. But to your point, though, that's his style, right?
Right.
That's what he feels comfortable with, right? Hey, man, sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone if you want to win.
Yeah.
You do. All right, couple things that people have asked. The Fox broadcast on Saturday, and I watched a little bit of it. I thought it was extremely unfortunate that the delay took place, but I thought that the group did a great job trying to cover that gap, and I think they lost some people. I think they lost some of the casual fans.
Yeah.
I think they might have picked up some. I think it was all a timing thing. What time were people surfing and found that on the Fox national channel and saw what Hank Cherry did that first 30 minutes and what everybody else was doing? Did that capture their attention? I don't know. I guess we'll find out in the ratings. But I think it was very, very unfortunate that the first time live fishing was airing on a national network that they had a 2-hour delay.
You see it happen in anything that's outdoors. They go to NASCAR, it rains, it gets rained out. You have lightning delays in golf, and I think, you do lose some, but I wonder how many people checked back in. But that's one of the challenges of doing fishing. That's one of the challenges of any outdoor venue like that. So
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought Bass did really well was dealing with the high water conditions at the launch. I was like, well, how are they going to deal with that? They can't get to the docks. They can't get to the bank. They actually had Mercer waiting out there.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe made that weather delay last a little bit longer. The fact that you couldn't have the boats there ready because they're in the water. And I was also impressed with the attendance at the launches and how they dealt with that in the morning, as well as far as getting interviews and generating interest for it at the launch. There are a lot of logistics in this event that aren't typical logistics.
Yeah. Crowd-wise, early estimates are between 140 and 150,000. I'm sure that number will be coming out here shortly. I'm going to ask you this, and we can get into this during the marathon show. We can talk about it later in the week. 51st year, is that
Correct.
right? 51st year. Is it time to change some things?
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, what if things didn't change in other iconic events over time, because it is starting what they are doing? I firmly believe it, because I talked to a lot of fans that were not going to the arena.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of factors you had in there this year. You still had the COVID potential issue. You had the heat. You had, whatever other scenarios that people were going through. But the fact that content is so available now that there's no need to go to the weigh-in unless you really want to. And I talked to a number of people that said, nope, I'm going home. I'm going to watch it on the big screen. I'm going to get in the comfort of my own home. I already know who probably is going to win. There's no reason for me to go to the weigh-in.
I don't really understand that. It's just hard for me. it's hard for me to wrap my head around. You could actually visually watch the guy win the Bass. You could be there and feel that moment of him winning the Bassmaster Classic.
But that's you. You have been entrenched in this game for so many years. You're trying to get to the Bassmaster Classic. I think it's a little different. And the way that information is flowing down, I mean, you don't even have cable TV, dude. Why not? Because you get most of the information that you want on what? Your cell phone.
Correct.
It's changed. It didn't used to be that way. They're still doing things basically the same way that they've done for 50 years, but now the information that's getting to the people, to the fans, has dramatically changed. Dramatically changed. Dude, there were only probably 1,500 people there on day one.
Yeah, and it was a little different because this is one of the first classics where the stage was actually located in the middle with the screen all the way around.
You know why? It's because of what happens in that end zone,
right,
which was really cool, by the way, of where they had the like VIP area.
Right.
It's like an open bar, restaurant. Really, really cool arena. I'll give them 10 out of 10 on the arena. The arena was cool.
Really cool because in the past classics, when you hear cheering, you see it, there's large empty sections of seating just because they can't see it. So they block it off and they put
Typically,
to have a 360 surround seating.
Which is not the first time they've done that.
Yeah, but it worked really well, I thought.
With that arena.
Absolutely. That arena was awesome when it came to the
maximum capacity is 14,000. 14,000 people, which includes that VIP area and everything else. My estimation, based upon what I saw, I went in there multiple times, went up the elevator and went in the little
press deal.
Yeah. And, day one, I'd say about 1,500. Day two, maybe 3,000. Day three, they were probably pushing maybe 6,500, 7,000
That's
people.
exactly what I was going to say, Mark.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It sounded loud. They're cheering.
Oh, it was a great crowd.
It really was.
Great vibe, great situation. But in this day and age, with so many factors going on, and because of this, I think they're going to have to figure out what to do if they want a packed house.
Yeah, because you definitely lost some. Like if you were going to walk through the expos without air conditioning, then you had a bucket, you had a couple rods, you couldn't bring any bags into the arena.
Yeah.
I promise you they lost hundreds of people that said, it's 100 degrees out and I got a bag of stuff I just bought and we've got an hour drive home. Let's just get out of here and get home and we can watch it. We got to meet the guys at the expo.
That's what a lot of people told me, man. A lot of people told me that. So I know they've tried the concert route. You remember they've had concerts before. You remember one year at Pittsburgh, they had the comedian. They didn't need that in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was unbelievable. Felt sorry for him.
Yep.
He failed miserably. But I just think that there are certain areas that if you're going to go there, you're going to have to, you got to have the whiffum. What's in it for me to go to this?
And there's a lot of stuff in that area, too, that you could go to as far as the Stockyards, Cowtown, Dallas, Fort Worth, things that you know what I mean?
I stayed downtown. All right, I stayed in a hotel that was downtown, which was about 3 miles from the venue. I went out to dinner by myself one night. I went out to dinner with Ken Duke one night, and we just kind of randomly... The night that I went out, I sat at the bar and had barbecue, and I just randomly would talk to people that came up. I go, hey, do you know what's going on in town? I probably talked to 10 people. Nobody knew what was going on.
None of the Uber drivers did. And one guy had a hook on his hat.
Yeah. All right. Now, the other thing from a media perspective that I'll say that I was disappointed in, and you have no idea, and only Bass can answer this question. All right. But I watched the 10 o'clock news.
Right.
2 nights in a row. There wasn't a single mention or any interviews or anything on the NBC affiliate and the CBS affiliate during the entire
I know there was
time.
leading up to it. I know they were on like Good Morning Dallas and things like that.
Well, that's all great, but the event's taking place.
I don't know.
You know what they covered? They covered high school baseball.
Yeah.
Blowout coverage of the 6A and the 4A championship. They also covered the guy that knocked down 100,000 bowling pins in the USBC Nationals.
Yeah, really. I mean, you're also dealing with a bigger market. So the bigger the market, the more competition there is, the more people are interested.
It's the biggest event in
our
our
game.
game.
I hear you.
So, like I said, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on with that because the networks only have X number of people. The weekends are really, really tough to cover. They have to devote their resources to things that they have already committed to. And believe me, Bass has done everything they can to get that stuff on the local news. Didn't happen, though. Did not happen.
I agree.
So.
But overall, I have a very positive vibe from this classic.
Yeah. I think because of the movement of the dates, the Expo was enormously challenging.
Do you think this classic will stick out in 5 years? Will you look back and no? Like which ones stick out to you? Obviously Pittsburgh. We talk about that all the time.
Pittsburgh, the classic.
The first Randy Howell's classic at Gunnersville sticks out to me.
Yeah,
that one sticks out to me.
First one I ever went to, the one that Denny Brower won when you won.
That was that's both of our first
big
ones.
Time, man.
I also thought Chris Lane's classic in 2012 on the Red River. That one sticks out to me. Just as far as the overall, like and it's hard to explain unless you've been there, but the classic vibe, right? Sometimes you get there and you leave and you're like, holy cow, that was classic week.
Yeah.
Like
but you know what, man? Everybody takes in their own personal feelings and their own personal reactions about the classic. But when you look at the masses, it 100% depends on where you have the classic.
100%, and
that is the vibe.
A lot of the people that I talked to that had BTL hats on or that came and said hi to both me and you. You know, I'd ask them, "Hey, you having a good time? What's your favorite time?" And the only complaint I got was, it's a lot of walking and it's really hot. But overwhelmingly, they're like, yeah, this is the experience that I was hoping for when I came to the Bassmaster Classic this week.
Yeah.
And a lot of people from Texas, a lot of 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour drives that weren't staying, but that were just there for the day that came in.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that there were a lot of first timers there?
Yes, absolutely. There were a lot of people that I talked to. It was their first classic that they had attended.
Yeah.
Because Texas is so big, there's so many people in that surrounding area. You know, Houston's a long way away, and Grand's a long way away. But man, that DFW area, I mean, there's a lot of fisheries around there, a lot of people who fish, a lot of people who can make that day trip out of it. And I saw a ton of families, Mark. Did you notice that too at the Expo?
Well, summertime, man.
That's what Chris said, but just a ton of, the wife, the kids, the whole 9 yards.
Summertime. That's it. If that takes place in March, you don't see it that much.
Yep.
You just don't. So it was, from a fishing standpoint, it was really cool to watch.
Yeah, and it was tough. Could have been better fishing.
What was the coolest thing from a fishing standpoint that you saw or that you talked to anybody about?
What do you mean?
Just any of the competitors, if you happen to see it, in the live coverage.
Well, just the fact that it was a bush flipping classic.
Yeah, but there wasn't one specific thing that you thought was cool? Here's
what I thought was really cool was, so Bass did, and they do these photo galleries, right? Mm-hmm. The aerial photo galleries that they took of Ray Roberts, because I didn't get to go out on the lake, right? Yeah. And you didn't either.
Yeah.
But those aerial photo galleries, the drone from the air, really put into perspective what these guys were able to do. So then when you saw them fishing or you saw them up in there, you realize how much stuff was in the water and the type of stuff they were fishing and how they were losing the fish in the bushes, how they were getting them out. It really kind of gave you the feel like you were watching them. You knew what they were flipping.
Yeah.
And at any point, too, you're on a lake that's got giants on it.
Yeah. It's pretty obvious for me. I mean, come on, man. I talked about it already. Come on. 2 things. By the same guy.
By the same guy.
I was intrigued by the whole deal.
What's that?
Seriously? Can't remember?
The Kerr thing?
Justin Kerr. Yeah. The Jig and Pig and the Rat.
Yeah.
That was cool, man.
Yeah.
That was the highlight from a fishing perspective that I saw.
There were a bunch of guys that I met one night, and they're from Arizona and the West Coast. They were there to just be support for Justin Kerr.
Yeah.
And they were like, dude, they were like, tell Jeffries, thank you for giving us love on the West Coast. Like, out of all this, we love BTL. We listen to it. And Jeffries is the only one that understands it. And we listen to it. And they're like, dude, if anybody gets Justin Kerr on, they're like, have Jeffries get Justin Kerr on BTL to give us some West Coast love.
Yeah, he's coming on.
They were super pumped about it. They're like, dude, this was before the final day. This was after he'd weighed in 4. They're like, he's on the big fish. He's doing West Coast stuff. He could win this classic.
You ever fished a rat?
Super humped.
You ever fished a rat?
Super hyped. Just that Spro rat. And then one of our listeners sent us that rat, and I fished that some. That's a confidence situation deal. I mean, I've got it in the arsenal. I'm not exactly sure what type of situation I'm looking for. I just hope it pops in my head like, oh, this is a rat situation.
All right, man. The next big thing is who's going to be in for next year, who's going to win Angler of the Year. I will be thoroughly shocked if Seth Feider does not win Angler of the Year. I think it's his to lose.
Agreed. Going
to a place that he's had an enormous amount of success. And it's going to be cool to watch and see what happens, see how he handles pressure. I truly believe that he's got ice in his veins, and he's going to knock this thing out pretty solid and win Angler of the Year.
I agree.
All right. Who's going to be in the Classic? Going back to Hartwell, right?
Yep.
Fourth time?
Correct.
Man. How about some West Coast love, man? Let's have the Classic on the West Coast. I think it would work.
Oh, 100% it would work.
I think it would work. And then the other thing that we're going to do, we're going to talk about, I asked you about change.
Yep.
And I talked to several people about an idea that I have. And for the first time, some of the guys that said that I was out of my mind about some of the stuff that I came up with in changing the Classic format, for the first time, they agree with me. It's not changing it from 3 to 4 days. It would be much, much better for the anglers. It would be much better for what is the giant revenue maker for bass? What is it?
The Expo.
The Expo. It'd be better for them. It would be better for the fans, better for the sponsors. And we'll talk about that later on in the day. All right, man. What do you got going on? You know what we're doing tomorrow? Any idea what we're doing tomorrow?
We're getting ready for our remote show.
That's happening on Wednesday.
Yeah, from
We're going to have
Black
a special
Rifle
guest in
Coffee
studio
Company.
tomorrow.
Who do we got in studio?
Chris Jones is going to be live in studio tomorrow.
I'm really looking forward to that.
All right, so that's the plan right now.
I met his whole family.
Yeah, unless
unless
something happens, Chris Jones is going to be live in studio with us tomorrow. So hopefully that will continue.
I'll tell you what, he had a lot of weight on his shoulders.
Yeah,
because I know that Christy and Brad Hallman, I mean, they were like fishing the tournament through Chris Jones. When you saw willows and stuff like that in the water, I mean, dude, he's cut out of that same mold as a Terry Butcher, a Jeff Reynolds, a Brad Hallman, a Jason Christie, and he was like carrying the torch for Oklahoma flooded willow flippers in this Classic.
Yeah.
And he came through in flying colors.
All right. The other thing is Wednesday, Matt talked about it. We're going to be live from the Black Rifle Coffee retail location here in Moore, Oklahoma with worldwide Mr. James Watson. And I've got some coupons and some stuff that we're going to give away. And we're going to have a good time. So make sure you join us. Time's going to be a little different. It's going to be 9 a.m. We're backing everything up 30 minutes. And we will see what happens with Mr. Watson. There's no telling what's going to happen on the show Wednesday. And then Frank Scalish, day 4 on Thursday. And then next Monday, big announcement, massive announcement by the genius. He's going to be a special guest on the Monday show, talk about a new project that he's got going on. And folks, you've been asking for it. Well, it's going to happen on Monday. So 1 week from today, Frank will be on just for a few minutes to talk about his new project. So I want to thank once again all the BTL fans that we talked to, spoke with at the Bassmaster Classic. You guys are awesome, and hopefully we will have a few show up to our remote on Wednesday with James Watson. All right, Matthew, anything else?
No, thanks, guys. Like I said, it was great to meet all the BTL supporters at the Bassmaster Classic. Really made it a memorable week. and awesome to watch Hank Cherry go.
Yeah.
Back to back.
It's pretty cool, man. Well deserved. All right, folks, that's it. Tomorrow, hopefully, Chris Jones in studio right here. Everybody out there, be safe. That's it. We're out of here.